Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled is artist Kenny Scharf and author John Morgan Wilson. Kenny Scharf was born in LA, grew up in the San Fernando Valley, then moved to Beverly Hills, where he attended Beverly Hills High. After college in Santa Barbara, Kenny moved to New York. What took you to the frenzy of Manhattan from this kind of really serene California life that you had?
Well, I was in a art history class in Santa Barbara, and we came to the section on pop art and Andy Warhol and the factory, and I was pretty much packing my bags. And
during school?
Yeah, I was like, I gotta leave here, and I know that it's not the 60s anymore, it was the 70s, but I knew that there must be something like that going on there. And at the time in the 70s, the art world in California, it wasn't very exciting, and you know, New York was the place to be, so I thought, I'm gonna go to New York and I'm gonna meet Andy Warhol. And
Did you really have these things in your mind?
Oh yeah.
Because Edie's family was from Santa Barbara.
Right.
Did you know
I
any
never
of
knew
those?
her, but of course I knew about her, and I read, you know, her book, and I've seen her in the films
Right.
and stuff. But
was that before you went? Yes, it probably was.
Around the
same
time, yeah.
So when you got to New York, did your dream come true?
Well,
did you meet Andy Warhol?
I did. It wasn't right away. And in retrospect, it was pretty quick, but at the time it seemed like an eternal wait to get to meet him.
Was that the one big goal? Because here you had all these pop artists. You had Lichtenstein and Rosenquist and Rauschenberg
Right.
and Jasper Johns and
They're all fantastic.
on and on.
All inspirational artists. But there was something about the factory, the scene that enticed me. It just was so exciting that I wanted to.
And
be
there
part
I
of it.
was. I was already there, Kenny.
You were.
I was already there, ahead of the Santa Barbara art student who came in. How did you happen to then hook up with Keith Haring? Was it after you met Andy?
No, it was before. Keith and I had moved to New York, and I was going to School of Visual Arts.
Why did you go to...
That was the only one that would accept me.
But I mean, were you still going to go to school? Was that your idea when
Well,
you went to New York?
I was going to UCSB for 2 years.
Oh, I see.
And when I was living in Santa Barbara, and I told my parents I'm moving to New York, and they said I'm going to go art school. Okay, well, you have to apply to all these different art schools, and here in LA as well.
So you went with a purpose, a art purpose.
And I was happy I didn't get accepted to any of the art schools here.
Right.
And the one that would accept me was that school, and I met Keith probably my first week. He was attending the school.
He was going to school too,
Mm-hmm.
and he had come from Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
Pennsylvania. Was he kind of quiet like he was then, or was he more outgoing?
Well, as soon as I met him, we kind of made a connection, and I felt like I found someone who has a crazy drive similar to mine, and he was doing amazing things back then, and we just hit it off right away.
So you ended up at a time when you were painting with Jean-Michel Basquiat, Keith Haring, Kenny Scharf, some of the other taggers. I can't remember.
Lots of graffiti artists.
A lot of graffiti artists. And you were actually said to be a graffiti artist.
I was called a graffiti artist because I did a lot of art in the street with spray can.
Oh, you did do that?
I did, and I actually went down in the subways a couple times, but I never considered myself a graffiti artist. You know, I'm from LA, and I went to Beverly Hills High School, and there I was, you know, in the trains with all these these homeboys from the South Bronx. So I never really wanted to say that I was that, but I did partake in the whole time, and my attitude towards making the art in the street was very different. I wasn't a tagger. I didn't have one tag that I just
they had a
repeated.
Samo. Right.
I did something different each time. I thought of it more as art in the street than actual graffiti.
So what was the difference between your art and their art then?
Well, as I was saying, they did something called a tag, which was everyone had a signature.
Right.
Signature, basically, and you try to get it out as many times as possible.
Just get your signature out.
Yeah, whatever that style was that you did.
Right.
And I wasn't about making one signature. I was about
I see.
just making a million different things.
But I remember one of the times at Studio 54 I went in, and all the hallways were filled with your art, the bathrooms.
You mean the Palladium?
The Palladium.
Yeah.
Oh, it was already past 54.
It was the Palladium.
It was
It was Steve Rebell and Ian Schrager.
Right.
But it was another club, yeah.
It was another club, but
Yeah.
it was all over, and it was framed, right? There were pieces framed. You had also painted on the walls.
I did a installation there, and actually it was in the basement. I did the telephone booths.
I remember that.
And the hallways, and
Yeah.
it was kind of like a lounge. And then there were some paintings as well.
Was the Palladium?
Yeah.
I couldn't remember
1985.
I see. But how did they happen to choose you, or did you go to them?
Well, I guess I was a rising art star in New York at the time, and art had just become, well, as I remember Steve Rubell said, art stars are the rock stars of today.
Right.
So they're opening a big nightclub, and they kind of decided to get a few different artists. There was me, Keith Haring, Jean-Michel Basquiat, and Francesco Clemente that were all asked to do something for the club.
I see. So everyone went then, as they became their own stars, not a group of stars anymore, they all went their own way. Your work turned out to be like what we have on the set today.
Well, this is a small little piece of
But how would
example.
you? It's been described as cartoon art. We know it's not that simple. We know that there's a lot of thought, and you're, for want of a better word, philosophical about what you put on that canvas. So why don't
Sometimes there is, sometimes there's not. I mean,
really?
I have many different ways of making a painting or a piece of art. Sometimes I just want to escape and have fun with color and forms and shape and not think about issues. And sometimes I'll do something that's very based on a certain, maybe a political point of view,
Right.
very dogmatic.
But you use the same style.
No, I don't actually.
Oh, okay, then tell us.
Well, I've gone through many different styles.
Can I see it in here?
Yeah, you might be able to show you. I can maybe find it for you. The style that I guess I'm known for.
Let's start with something like this that's framed. It looks framed.
Okay, well there's
yeah.
a different style right there. This is a series of paintings I did called the Wildlife series.
Wait, the other side.
The other side.
This one.
Yeah.
This one, yeah.
Based on
That
scenes
one, right.
from natural history,
Ah.
and they're more realistic, although there's a lot of fantasy still in there. I actually have a few of this paintings from this series showing right now at Gagosian Gallery.
And then on this side?
This is a recent painting, but it's more of the style that people, I guess, kind of associate with me, which is what I named back in 1981 or something. I called it pop surrealism, which is taking pop imagery like cartoons and fusing them with, well, actually that one's kind of more abstract. I mean,
This one.
this one would be, I guess, more in the pop surrealism style, although you got abstract art in there too.
Were you painting like this when you were in New York? Because you're living here now. You're
Yeah.
living in Los Angeles now.
Well, actually, that painting was done in Florida, but see, I kind of like to bounce around in different styles. I've kind of created a few different styles and ways of working, and I might I don't do one painting in one style and then bounce to the next day, but I'll go through a period of a few months to a year in a certain like genre of that I created, and then I'll think, oh well, I want to go back and explore another way of working.
So it really doesn't have to do with your age and growth. That was one of the questions I was going to ask you. As you get older and as you got away from that pop culture type of thing, that did your work change? But it doesn't sound so much like.
I'm constantly evolving and revolving and going back and exploring and refining, and it's a constant evolution.
You mentioned that you have it that you show at Gagosian. I know you
There's
show
one
at
right now,
Gagosian
yeah.
Gallery. Larry Gagosian has a gallery in New York and Los Angeles. Does he pick a certain kind of artist to show with him, do you think?
Well, I think if you look at this artists that he shows, they're pretty varied.
They seem to be.
Pretty varied. I showed with Larry back in '84 here in LA, and then I haven't shown with him since until now.
Over the past 20 years that I've known you, maybe longer than that, you lived in upstate. You moved to New York.
Right.
And then you moved to upstate New York to a huge mansion. Then you moved to Brazil. Then you moved to Florida.
Yeah. I'm kind of a
And now you're
gypsy.
back in Los Angeles.
Now I'm back to
and
my
you have
roots.
a family.
I have 2 girls and a wife and dogs
they
and cats
move
and
along.
birds. And
They move along with
they
you.
have to come with me. They don't always like to, but they come with me.
And what happens when you're in each one of those places? Do your influences change?
Well, I think they do, whether you want them to or not. I think where you live obviously has an effect.
In color, do you think, or light?
In colors,
or?
in all the different ways. But for the most part, I think most of my work comes from inside. So it doesn't really matter where I am. I might get inspired by a place or something I see, but most of it comes from inside.
I love this sculpture. I'm going to carry it here because I think it's me. I have this collection of portraits.
I know.
And I don't think you have to go very far.
I have to do your portrait. I'm doing portraits right now.
Are you?
Yeah.
That'd be great. But does this look like me?
Actually, yes. You just take those 2 eyes and put it right in the middle, and there you are.
Can you do it? That's it. Have you done a lot of things like this?
This was for a mannequin company called Pucci. I designed mannequins, and these were actually what they call them minis, and they hang jewelry on them.
Oh, they're great. Oh, so they are? They would go into a store?
Yeah, this is a commercial project. I've done windows from this project, and actually right now I designed and I'm fixing up the children. I did a bunch of children mannequins.
That's so great because when you first went to New York, Andy Warhol was doing windows and Rauschenberg was doing windows.
A long line of pop artists doing
So you can
store windows. But they usually did them before.
That's what I mean.
And I found myself doing them after, and
But I think it's probably more fun for you. They were doing it as a way of survival. Now
well, I got to do it with my art.
Yeah.
It wasn't, so it was a better position. I guess, yeah.
That's great, and congratulations. And thanks for coming and being with us today. And don't go away, we'll be right back with John Morgan Wilson. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and we're back with author John Morgan Wilson. John Wilson lives in West Hollywood, where his Benjamin Justice mystery novels take place. He's a graduate of San Diego State, where he was an award-winning columnist for the school's daily Aztec. We had the Daily Trojan at SC. John, you've been teaching at UCLA in the writers program. You teach both fiction and nonfiction. How do you teach the difference? Because you write a lot of fiction.
Well, actually, it's UCLA Extension Writers Program, and there is a difference between UCLA and UCLA Extension. UCLA Extension's open to the entire public, and I taught nonfiction for about 15 years because that's what I did. I started out as a journalist, did a lot of freelancing, wrote a book on magazine article writing back in '93.
I'd love to see that. I don't think we ever know. I mean, I'm a journalist too, and I think you always are doubting yourself. Am I doing it the right way? Is there an easier way to do it?
Well, it's a real nuts and bolts book, but it just went out of print, I think, after 7 years. It was in hardcover for 7 years.
Really?
And in 95, 96, I had moved back at the end of the 80s. I moved into television fact-based writing, documentaries, reality, news. And I've been doing that through the 90s, but in the middle of the 90s, I decided to write mystery fiction and wrote my first one and got a contract with Doubleday to write 3 more. And I decided I would rather teach fiction writing than nonfiction, because that's really where my passion was developing.
Well, you talk about fact-based work that you do. Did it come from did your fiction writing come from your fact-based work?
I think that a lot of the skills, you can really ground yourself well in skills when you're a pretty seasoned print journalist.
But what about storylines?
Well, I was a reporter. I started out as a police reporter many, many years ago, and in the documentary writing I'm doing a show now called Anatomy of Crime on Court TV. I deal with a lot of crime, and I've always had a fascination for crime, criminals, and also police work, and also a running theme in my mystery novels, kind of the abuse of power. And that's kind of a running theme from book to book to book.
How would you get into, say, this mystery genre when we had all this Cold War, dramas going on, and you kind of think like, well, this is going to be the end of any intrigue, and yet you've created all this Benjamin Justice intrigue.
Well, mystery writing and thrillers are 2 very different genres. Thrillers are primarily driven by suspense, the ticking clock, and mysteries are literally about who done it, who committed the murder, and you don't find that out to the end of the book. Now,
the intricacies,
the detective work. Now, sometimes they become a hybrid. A lot of people mix the 2 genres now, but they are 2 distinct genres.
That's interesting.
And I write mysteries. I don't write thrillers, although I just finished my first thriller. My agent gets it in a couple of weeks.
But can't a detective piece be a suspenseful?
Sure, and that's when they do
thriller?
mix. That's when they do mix. But if you don't know who the murderer is till the very last scene or the last page, which is the classic mystery or whodunit, that's a pure mystery. That's what the Benjamin Justice mystery series is.
Well, Benjamin Justice lives in West Hollywood. It's a very gay neighborhood.
Well, it's a very mixed neighborhood.
It's mixed, but we always think of it as a gay neighborhood. And he turns out to be a gay detective.
Yes.
I mean,
he's not a detective. He's a former investigative reporter. He was a brilliant young investigative reporter for the LA Times who won a Pulitzer Prize and had to give it back because he fabricated the story and they found out. And this is his great burden. No one ever believes him. So he has to nail down every fact when he investigates a murder on his own, tighter than anyone else, because he carries this great burden of no credibility.
But we have the usual private eye, or gumshoe, or whatever you want to call him, who is like Mr. Macho, Mr. Heterosexual. Is there a difference in his characterization?
He's a pretty tough, reckless guy. USA Today recently compared him to Raymond Chandler's character, Philip Marlowe. He said he's reckless like Marlowe. He's down and out sometimes and fights back against, he's the underdog. But he may, USA Today, they gave a great review for the latest book, The Limits of Justice. They said the difference is, though, he is gay, and of course in this latest book, it's kind of a milestone. He's also HIV positive. He becomes the first HIV positive mystery series hero in the history of publishing, to my knowledge.
This is The Limits of Justice, which is just out. And is this when Benjamin Justice finds out about his health condition?
When the book opens, he has found out about it. He's been on a 6-month destructive drinking binge, and his health is in serious decline and jeopardy. It was at the end of the 3rd book, which was Justice at Risk, which came out last year, and it was kind of a cliffhanger at the end. We didn't know if he was HIV positive or not.
Oh, I see. So I have Justice at Risk right here in paperback, so I can take this on the airplane with me the next time I go out. You've said that he has this disease, and it's a fatal disease in many, many case situations, and you do have a series of these books. Are you putting a limit on this poor Benjamin Justice guy?
Not
or?
at all. You know, when I pitched it to Doubleday, the thing that's happened, of course, is the new medicines have come out. They came out in the mid-90s, and many, many lives were being prolonged. The quality of life was much greater, and many people were living 15, 20 years with HIV, and even longer. That's the case now.
Right.
Now, we've learned that these drugs, the so-called AIDS cocktail, is not a panacea or a cure. And I kind of decided to have Justice become HIV positive when that news was coming out, because a lot of people were taking it as a panacea, saying it was a cure. My involvement with the gay community, with the AIDS community, I lost my lover in '87. And even though I came out of the 80s uninfected by the virus, I worked the AIDS hotline. I was very involved with it, and still am very involved with it. I wanted to take him in this new direction, to engage me with him as a writer again, and to give him maybe another obstacle and challenge in life that would take the character and the stories in a new direction and maybe freshen it a little.
Well, I was going to say, it will take it in a new direction. But I guess with this drug that you talk about can prolong his life too, and you can
Oh, he
talk
could be
about
around
that.
for 15, 20 years,
so
and who knows what's going to happen in that time, because with this, you know, being HIV positive in the year 2000 is so much different than being HIV positive in 1990.
Right.
There are all these options, these treatments. People can get early detection. That's why it's so important to get tested.
And do you feel this is kind of a mission in this book that you're doing?
You know, I
as
didn't
well?
want it to be. When I sat down to write the first Justice mystery, which was Simple Justice in 1990, it came out in '96, and won the Edgar Award for Best First Mystery.
I was going to ask you about that. Go on, let's talk about that.
That was an honor. I was very flattered to win that. And when I sat down to write the book, I kind of envisioned this lighter, more commercial, more entertaining, page-turning kind of mystery. But from the first line, I found the voice of this character, and it was very dark, very hard-edged. He was a very troubled, complex character, and I think a lot of what I had brought with me from the 80s and what a lot of us had gone through, losing so many friends to AIDS, I didn't expect that. That wasn't in the outline I'd worked
that
out.
wasn't you? It wasn't autobiographical?
A lot of it turned out to be much more autobiographical than I expected, and much, much darker. And once it got going, it felt real to me. It felt good. We sold the book very quickly to Doubleday. They signed me to write 3 more.
Was that the one you wrote so fast?
Very fast, 7 weeks.
Because that is fast. I mean, I could never write a book, but I can write a column. So there's so many differences, I think. I mean, you can get a column out really fast because you have to do it. You're on deadline. But usually books take a much longer
Well, I think about
time.
them a long time, and I outline and research and think through the characters and work from a very, very well-developed outline before I start writing. And then when I start, I work 10, 12, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. And partly that's out of necessity. I write for a living. So the longer I take, the less money I make. And if I took 6 months to write it on the advances I get, I'd be broken in debt.
How do you write it actually?
I sit at the computer and I make those fingers move, and I keep my behind in the chair, because that's the secret to being a professional writer. Don't leave the chair.
That's
Keep
do you
writing.
Teach that?
Oh, yes. In my UCLA Extension classes, I'm teaching a mystery writing workshop, a 2-day on October 7th and 14th coming up.
Yeah.
And they'll hear that again and again.
But you got the Lambda Award and you got the Edgar Award. Do you think those awards helped you in selling your book, or
I think
involving yourself?
Certainly the Edgar Award. Some people call it the Oscar of mystery writing, and I think it helps you reach a broader audience of especially hardcore mystery buffs. It really means something in the mystery world. And
there is a real group, isn't there?
Very much. It's one of the most gratifying things to me, because when I wrote this mystery novel, honestly, I was not a mystery buff. I'd loved mysteries as a kid, but I came back to mystery writing after reading Walter Mosley's Devil in a Blue Dress in the early 90s, and I loved the book so much, I started reading mysteries again and found out that mysteries had changed tremendously. They were much more diverse. They weren't just the old hard-boiled gumshoe with a dame at the end of the bar and a whiskey in one hand and a gun in the other. There were women primarily broke down the barriers. Marcia Muller, and particularly, and Sarah Paretsky. opened it up. And when women opened it up to female sleuths, then gay sleuths were created. And then rabbi sleuths were created. And it doesn't matter anymore what your sleuth is if you tell a compelling story and your character is interesting. And once I realized there was this diversity, I thought there might be a place in mystery writing for me. I wrote my first one, and then when I had this contract to write 3 more, I said, gee, I better find out what mystery writing's all about. And what I discovered was this wonderful world of mystery fans, people who are very selective, very demanding, but if they like your series character, they are very loyal.
Then they keep following you from one book to the other.
Yes.
That's why it's to the publisher's advantage to sign you up for three books.
And that's why they
whatever.
like to buy the series. And what's interesting, when The Limits of Justice came out this year, and it's done much better than any of their other books, and as it's now gone into a second printing, and as it's sold better, the paperbacks have started selling because people discover the new one and they go back and rediscover the first ones, particularly Simple Justice, the first one, and then people start reading through the series.
But then they know your name, they know the character, and they're more familiar with what's going on. Would they miss something? Like this one you said was a cliffhanger to the AIDS infection. If they went back and read it after they wrote Limits of Justice, would it still work for them?
No, a lot of people love doing that, going back and discovering the character from his beginnings. Benjamin Justice ages chronologically and goes through life crises and relationships naturally from book to book to book. He gets older from book to book to book. But each book is also a standalone book. So you can read The Limits of Justice and understand everything that's going on, or you can go back and start over with Simple Justice and read through all 4 Justice Mysteries.
Well, we've got the line now, the line of reading we can do and how we can do it, and I think we should start with The Limits of Justice and then go back and see Benjamin Justice and what he does. And we thank you so much for being with us, John Wilson, today. And I wish you could teach me to write a novel.
I'm sure you could just sit down and get started.
Thank you, thank you. And thank you for being with us today on the Joan Quinn Profiles. Keep writing to 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, and we'll see you next time, the Joan Quinn Profiles. Thank you. You were great.